I may have trouble making tutorials, but this was highly requested, so here's a guide on how I render skin. Before we get started, here are the brushes I'm using. I'm going to split this up into 4 sections. First steps, shadows, highlights, and final touches. Quick disclaimer, I do not draw in the specific order, so if things are randomly rendered and then not rendered in the next clip, that's why. Let's start off with the first steps. I always start off with blush. Why? I'm not sure. Grab your skin color and make it more saturated, then shift the hue to be more red, like this. On a separate layer, use the airbrush on wherever you're placing your blush. I usually do it on the cheeks, nose, and lip. Duplicate the layer and set the new version to multiply. I do this so that whatever shading and stuff I put on top of the blush doesn't completely cover it. You can play around with the opacities and then merge the non-multiply blush layer down onto the skin layer. Also, quick tip for choosing the bright lip color, just color drop where you place that blush on your lips and just adjust it to your liking, like how I'm doing. Next, we're going to take the skin color again and make it more saturated, maybe a little darker, and shift the hue just a little bit. Still using the airbrush, we're going to outline the skin like this. This just makes your character look a lot less flat. Here's what it looks like after doing it to the whole body. A lot better, right? And it's pretty much perfect. I think that's all of my first steps. So now I'm going to move on to shadows. Before you even begin plotting down your shadows, you need to figure out where your light source is coming from. Mine's coming from the top left-hand corner-ish. I drew a sun so you guys could see what I mean. Now that you've got that figured out, on a separate layer, set it to multiply. I'm going to take a deep red because my environment is really deep and warm, so it'll fit very nicely. I'd advise against using black for multiply layers because it looks really gray and muddy. Here's it finished. However, this layer is only a guide for now, so lower the opacity by a lot. Going back onto that main layer, I'm taking that skin color again and we're making it more saturated, darker, and shifting the hue. Now I'm just going to be using my blending brush. Oh, never mind. And using that multiply layer as a guideline. For lighter shadows, I just lower the opacity of my blending brush and vice versa. For noses, here, I'll do a little guideline thing. Here's where I like to shade them no matter what lighting. Obviously, this may change per drawing, but it usually follows this shape. These parts are lighter and will be highlighted later on, so leave them be for now. Most faces will have a sort of shadow under the brow bone. Some brow bones are more prominent than others and therefore cast more or less of a shadow. I've mentioned how I shade lips before, but I'll do it again because I'm nice. Universally, I just do a shadow here and blend that out. Also, using the blending brush on a low opacity and blend around the mouth corners so they look really soft and 3D-ish. Now for the shadows I didn't place on the guidelines, like the collarbone and the chest area. Usually there is a shadow or shading or whatever behind the collarbone. This by itself is just, flat. However, there is a sort of dent in this area that creates a very slight shadow thing. Make sure your brush is on a very low opacity while shading this area. Now it looks a lot more 3D. I'm not really sure how to explain the chest area, but I think it's more like a spherical shape. So you can see one edge is sharp and the other's blended out as if it's its own circular thing, I guess. Might as well just copy what it looks like because I can't explain anything. If your hands look really flat like mine used to, I highly recommend shading the knuckles and the hand bones. As you can see, I'm shading on the knuckles and where a shadow from the bone would be because just look at this picture of the skeletal structure of a hand. It makes sense, right? Blend that out until it looks right. This is a really important tip. See how this is soft and faded? Well, look at me sharpening the edge of it to follow the bone structure of a wrist. It looks like the bone is 3D, right? So yeah, just like incorporate both soft and hard shadows, which I would go more in depth about, but around the eyes, which this isn't always the case, but sometimes there's a shadow beneath the eye, or like if you haven't, I don't even know how to pronounce it, but I'll put it on the screen. Yeah, I'm making it like pinky as if it's like makeup. Now, this is something I do all the time. On a low opacity, shade this triangle-ish shape right here and just blend it out like this. The area closer to the eye should be a bit darker. You can also shade the eyelid fold depending on your eye shape. Okay, I think it's time for highlights. Going back to those collarbones and using a light yellowish color, add a highlight to the top of the collarbones. For noses, highlight the tip of the nose, the top of the nostrils, and underneath the nostrils. I know this is technically a shadow, but I'll just talk about it now. I'm darkening the places I showed earlier so that they look a lot sharper next to the highlights because they kind of got blended out. Also, optional, but you can add a highlight on the sides of the nose. I usually add a highlight on the cheekbone closest to the light source. Around the eyes, highlight the inner corner and a bit on the eyelid. Also beneath the mouth corners, on the chin, and if your character has a defined cupid's bow, then add one here too. You can really play around with the highlights in general. Like I added some on the arms and hands and on the forehead, just like random places that are in the light, but that will change per drawing. So every other highlight I talked about is pretty much universal in all of my drawings. So that's pretty much it for highlights. You can blend them out to your liking or not if you want them like sharp and harsh. On to the final touches. Grab that shadow color and desaturate it so it's kind of grayish. Use this as a complementary, I think, color. I forgot the reason why it's done, but I think it's like a bounce light, but it like really makes those shadows interesting. So also on the shadows, take a reddish color and outline them. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is like the transition between the light and the absence of light. It just like really softens it, you know what I mean? Okay, last thing, take that skin color again and go directly to the other side of the color wheel. Pretty sure this is also called a complementary color. I don't have an exact way of doing this. I just kind of add it wherever I think it looks good at. Other things like freckles are specific to this drawing and don't really matter. So we're done. Now you can draw Mega Plat Skin.